Saucony surprised everybody by introducing the Endorphin Elite to the mix last year. So where did that leave the Saucony Endorphin Pro line? Well, let's break down the Saucony Endorphin Pro 4. What's up everyone, I'm Eric McIntyre, aka Rad Dad Bod, and you're watching Rad Dad Bod TV, where we review running shoes. Now, if it's your first time watching one of my videos, you may see that there are some timestamps in the description below. Feel free to click around and jump to different aspects of the review, but if you do so, I would sure appreciate if you came back and watched the full video when you had a second, as I put a lot of time and effort into making these reviews as comprehensive as possible for each and every one of you. Now, before we get into any of the specifics of the shoe, let's talk through some disclaimers and disclosures, and with this shoe, there actually are none. I purchased this shoe with my own money. No discount, no nothing, no affiliation with anyone. As such, no one watches the review beforehand. All these thoughts are entirely my own. Now with that out of the way, let's talk about intended use and price point. So the Endorphin Pro 4 is Saucony's marathon racing shoe, or at least one of them. That being said, this shoe is designed to go fast. This shoe is designed for the marathon distance specifically, but ultimately I think it's more so a race shoe nowadays, so it can be used at various race distances, but it's designed to go fast. As such, that's how we're going to be evaluating this shoe in the review today. Now, it comes in at around $225, which, believe it or not, is kind of on the lower end of the super shoe market. Many of them are kind of pushing the 300s nowadays. A lot of them fall more in that $250 range. But obviously, it's still not cheap. It's supposed to be a premium shoe. From a spec standpoint, it comes in at 7.7 ounces, which is light, but again, is pretty standard for a marathon racing shoe. The heel stack is a 40mm stack with a 32mm stack in the forefoot for an 8mm heel to toe drop, which is consistent with the line over time. Speaking of the fit, this shoe does have a fairly interesting fit. So the heel itself is a little bit wide, though I did not find it wide enough to warrant like a runner's knot, surprisingly. I think part of that is because you have a fairly normal fitting midfoot, and then you have a slightly narrower toe box, though I wouldn't call it full on narrow. Now, from a length standpoint though, I would say this shoe does fit true to size. So if you wear a 10.5, you should continue to wear that 10.5 in this shoe. Moving on to the upper, I couldn't find the exact terminology that is used for this upper, but basically it is a breathable mesh with kind of like a hexagon pattern there underneath. In addition to the mesh, you do have a fully knit tongue that feels very, very elastic, and it's not a separate piece. It is sewn into the upper, so you don't need to worry about it being like fully gusseted or sliding around or anything like that. It's just kind of an additional piece of material that is almost like a sock-like or booty-like upper without it being overly elastic kind of in the rest of the upper itself. Now for me, I really liked the upper as a whole from a breathability standpoint and a weight standpoint. It's incredibly lightweight. Your feet can breathe really, really, really well in this shoe. And like I said, although the heel is wide, you still can get some really good lockdown in the shoe just because of how the upper fits as a whole. Now, something that was a little bit annoying is that this tongue can bunch up a little bit just kind of as you're trying to lace it up and whatnot, but it wasn't anything that really caused me any discomfort or frustration as I ran. It was more so just as I was lacing up, I noticed it, but no excess chafing or friction because of it. Because that tongue is fairly elastic, I did find that I had to pull or cinch down the laces pretty tight, but I didn't find that I got any lace bite despite the tongue being really, really thin and not having basically any cushioning there just to save some weight. The shoe does have a little bit of cushioning in the heel, but just enough to prevent some chafing. I think that they approach the upper from the standpoint of how can we save as much weight as possible, and so that we can put the weight in the foam itself because they wanted to have a good amount of cushion underfoot. Speaking of the midsole, it's a dual density or a dual layer midsole. You have Power Run HG on top, and it's put in a Power Run PB carrier basically. Sandwiched between those two is a carbon fiber plate, and then you actually do have a sock liner as well, which I'm not sure, but I think it might be Power Run PB. So you have a little bit of extra cush or responsiveness right there in the shoe in that sock liner. This creates an overall really, really bouncy and really, really nice, comfortable experience underfoot. But despite the HG foam being very, very soft, very, very plush, and that Power Run PB being very plush and responsive, you have that carbon fiber plate, which is a really rigid plate. And so it causes this shoe to be very snappy while still being very comfortable and smooth as the shoe rolls through with that speed roll kind of geometry geometry of the midsole. For me, as far as the standard super shoes that have been released this year, not counting like the Evo 1 from Adidas, because that's like a really unique situation, this was my favorite overall midsole feel underfoot. I found that it wasn't punchy, so it wasn't like this aggressive attacking and rebounding off the ground. It wasn't like overly soft where you know, kind of just fell asleep in the shoe and you were looking more for like the comfort underfoot over long distances. No, the geometry of this shoe, as well as the foams and the plate, really do propel you forward in a way that is fast, it is responsive, it is snappy, but it's not uncomfortable. So I found, to me, that I thought that this foam did a really good job of striking a good balance between being comfortable while still being fast. Now, being a super shoe, I would say that this shoe is inherently unstable, right? I think that the geometry of the shoe, they've got kind of a slightly wider forefoot than they do there in the heel, does cause it to be a little bit more stable, or they tried to do stability elements without sacrificing kind of that speed and that responsiveness. But just when you get a shoe like this, when you get shoes that are designed to go fast, to go the marathon distance, they're just going to be inherently unstable to begin with. So I would not expect this to be used for a runner that needs a stability shoe. From a pace versatility standpoint, this shoe is not built to go slow. So this is not a shoe that you're gonna buy and kind of do a little bit of everything in it. It's not a shoe that you're gonna buy and say like, hey, I'm gonna go run my easy miles in this shoe. No, this shoe is designed to go fast. In fact, I think that this shoe feels great at the tempo and threshold paces, feels phenomenal at that marathon pace too, if you're trying to kind of really extend your speed. And I really actually like it. I just ran a mile time trial in this shoe and ran an adult PR. I like this shoe for short distances, for repeats, for some of those really fast, really kind of sharp miles or splits that you're looking for. So pace versatile as far as like, yes, you can do marathon pace. I really wouldn't be taking this out for like easy runs or even like normal long runs. Kind of that upper moderate is not where this belongs in my opinion. For the outsole, you have the XT900 rubber, which is very durable. It is very grippy as well. It does really good on kind of slicker surfaces, which is really nice. And so if you have a rainy day or your race day comes and there's some rain, you don't have to worry too much about that grip, which is very comforting. Now I did say durable, but at the same time, I look here kind of at the heel, kind of that outer heel or lateral heel, and there is some wear kind of on there. And frankly, that's more than I would have expected because I only have about 50-ish miles on these shoes. And so they probably are going to wear through for you. That being said, I know a lot of people only use their race day shoes for like 1 or 2 runs before their race plus on their race day. So if that's the case for you, you don't really have to worry about the durability of that. And then these can become more of like your workout shoe for future races as you get maybe a new pair for your A race later that year. I do like kind of this banded or this lattice pattern that they have going here. I think it does a good job. And overall, I really, really like the just underfoot feel of the Endorphin Pro 4. Now, who's this shoe for? You know, obviously this is going to be for people who are running marathons or want a super shoe for faster races. I do think this shoe doesn't have to be exclusively used for the marathon. So if you're a 5K athlete, I see a lot of 5K runners wearing like the Vaporflies, specifically nowadays the Vaporfly 3s. I feel like there's a similar use case with these shoes. There does feel like there's more cushion underfoot compared to the Vaporfly, but they feel comfortable on a track and they do feel comfortable for those short distances. Like I said, I actually time trialed a mile in these shoes and would probably select these if I was gonna go and time trial my 5K soon. So that being said, if you are a runner who doesn't just race marathons, but race a lot of different distances, this could be a good shoe for you. As far as who's this shoe not for, I don't think this is a first super shoe user shoe. At least if you're like a newer runner and looking for a carbon plated shoe for race day. It's not the most stable super shoe. Again, most super shoes, if not all super shoes, are not stable in general, but it's probably not gonna be a great overall fit for kind of that first usage. And one of the reasons I say that is because it doesn't feel like a max cushion shoe, even though there is 40 millimeters of foam underneath. And so if you're someone who is approaching the marathon for the first time, you want a super shoe, you want that extra help, but you're not sure if you're going to be able to really kind of withstand the damage that you're going to take on through that race. In those scenarios, I would choose something that has more of a cushioned feel. Again, that's not saying these aren't cushioned. They're very cushioned. They're 40 millimeters in the heel, 32 in the forefoot. but these feel like they propel you forward more so than protecting your joints and your legs and saving them for later in the race. While there are shoes like the New Balance Super Comp Elites or even the Hoka Cielo X1, right, which are more of the cushion type of super shoe. These are more propulsion type without being overly punchy. On that other end, if you have tried like the Asics Metaspeed Sky or Edge or the Nike Alpha Fly and they feel too aggressive for you, then this is that middle ground. I keep saying that. This is the middle ground super shoe. I love it for that use case where some of them are too aggressive, too harsh on your feet or lower limbs. Some of them are too cushioned and maybe you feel like you can't get the turnover or the pop that you want. This shoe sits firmly in the middle of those sensations to me. So if you are that type of runner where you maybe need a little protection, but you also want propulsion, but maybe you don't want as much propulsion or as rigidity that you'll get from others, this is a good option for you. Now, from a comparison standpoint, I saw another reviewer say that the Endorphin Speed 4 is basically almost as good as the Endorphin Pro 4 for a fraction of the cost. I believe these come in at $180. I'll have to fact check that, but I believe these come in at $180 versus these come in at $225. And with that mindset, the Endorphin Speed 4 is one of my top 3 shoes of the year. It's super, super versatile. It's going to allow you to kind of go a little bit easier if you need to versus the Pro 4 is kind of be more pure speed. What's interesting is in comparing these two shoes, if I had to choose one for the long run, I would go with the Pro 4. If I had to choose one for like an easy run, for sure I'd go the Speed 4. If I had to go kind of tempo or threshold, I might choose the Speed 4 actually. But the longer that I go, the more I'd want the Pro 4, the efficiency, the propulsion, the cushion that you get in this shoe. Obviously, visually, very, very similar. Setup is very, very similar. And so all in all, like they work really well together. If you are a Saucony runner, like you're going to feel at home in the Pro 4. So something to consider there. I love both of these shoes though. Something I do want to speak on, now this is the Endorphin Speed 2, but the Pro 2, Pro 1 and Pro 2, very similar overall setups to this shoe. The foam underfoot feels different. So back in the early Endorphin Pro line days of the 1 and 2, I found that the foam was very, very squishy and unstable. Like I didn't love the shoe as far as like it would kind of make my ankle feel a little bit sore after because I felt like I was having to stabilize my feet or stabilize my lower limbs a lot because this was so squishy and so just like plush underfoot. This is a little bit wider of a base and you don't have the same level of squish. Like squishing them in my hand, I can compress this a little bit more. So it's still Power Run PB on the outside here, but that Power Run PB now gives you a little bit more structure, a little bit more support. And so if you liked the early Endorphin models, then the Pro 4 or the, even the Speed 4 may not feel the same to you. They're a little bit different. So just keep that in mind if you have been a Saucony Endorphin line user. They're just a little bit different. And you can see the geometry and profiles have kind of changed a little bit as well. Just continuing to look at some of the other super shoes on the market, especially the more popular ones, the Alpha Fly 3 is a phenomenal shoe. This is what I describe as more punchy, and so it's very, very aggressive on kind of the forefoot. It really puts a lot of pressure and strain on your calves in my experience, right? So compared to the Pro 4 feels a little bit more smooth, right? Now, stack underfoot, I believe that they're about the same technically, but it does look like you get a lot more cushion underfoot from the Alpha Fly. And while true, it again has a much more aggressive hit on that forefoot. And so if you want something a little bit smoother, then the Pro 4 is going to be a little bit smoother than the Alpha Fly 3. Metaspeed Sky Paris is going to be a lot firmer underfoot. That foam feels very, very firm, yet supportive. And you kind of have a spoon shape with this shoe. And so in comparison, the Pro 4 is actually going to be a little bit softer, a little bit smoother as well. I find that they have a similar overall kind of heel to toe transition, but this one can get a little bit slappy with the bigger forefoot. All right, so there's my review on the Endorphin Pro 4. Just some final thoughts on the shoe. Overall, it is my number one choice of super shoe for 2024, again with the exception of the Adidas Evo 1, because I feel like that's kind of in its own unique category. I feel like this shoe can race pretty much any distance, and I love the overall feeling underfoot as far as propulsion, heel to toe transition. It gives you a good balance of kind of that propulsion while still giving you the cushion and comfort underfoot, which with most other super shoes nowadays, you're kind of picking one or the other. So this is the most balanced option in my opinion. Now, I appreciate you sticking around and watching to this point. If you have any questions on the Endorphin Pro 4, let me know in the comments. And just to wrap up, we'll leave you with the question, which is, when it comes to Saucony super shoes, do you prefer the Endorphin Pro 4 or the Endorphin Elite? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks, everyone.